going to be a hard task for all of us after the lunch, a bit challenging. And I'm not sure whether I'm going to dazzle with my PowerPoint skills. Okay. But thank you so much for inviting me at this event, which provides a fresh perspective into a topic that seems to be very exhausting, at least in the case of my country, North Macedonia, so the European integration of Western Balkans. We are talking and thinking about this more than 2 decades now, but it's still a topic. Yeah, nice. And I'm truly honored and delighted to share my thoughts with this audience. I want to express my gratitude to Joleza and all the organizers for their efforts, everything to be so impeccable as it is. Prior coming here, I was asked about my favorite quote to be added to the promotional materials, and it really made me think about the message that I want to convey and what are the words that are guiding me at this phase of, let's say, life and career. As I have recently returned from the US, the quote that came to my mind is, everyone thinks that the grass is greener on the other side. But the truth is actually that the grass is greener where you water it. And this corresponds also with our yesterday's conversation about having a villa with a garden, but also having enough time to water it. Maybe the inspiration also came from the fresh green color that is part of the event's logo, but yes, I do think that this sums up the European integration story of this region, of my country, North Macedonia, and of Albania. And I do think that the time is of an essence, and I will tell you why. So European Union is based on the vision of coming together, so Europe whole and free, and it is a narrative actually, and an identity. But it has started with economic integration. Last December, EU and Western Balkans leaders gathered here in Tirana to speak again, to reconfirm the key importance of the strategic partnership between the EU and the region, and to reassure that this is a region with a clear membership perspective as the EU promise holds. Reporters that were present asked the local citizens if they wanted to join the European Union. So maybe it's a good opportunity also to ask the audience, do you want to join the European Union? Yes, we're ready. Well, last December at least, majority said yes, and they said that it should have happened a long time ago, but I understand why there were only a few hands raised this time, and the question if we are ready and how we can answer this question. So for the Western Balkan citizens, the term European is more than a geopolitical belonging. It considers having shared values and desired standards. So for us, the EU membership is still perceived as embodiment of European values and principles of democracy and rule of law. So to come back to my quote and why I choose it, our progress and success in EU accession process should mean to make the grass green as it is on the other side, as it is in the member states of the European Union. That is the main goal of all the reforms which are at the core of the EU accession process as our prospect for a common European future. But no matter all the open disputes in this region, which are mainly of political nature, citizens in the region do share the same concerns and the same problems are pervading the region. So we can speak about corruption, we can speak about pollution, we are also concerned about money laundering, weak democracy, rule of law, brain drain, we mentioned this yesterday, also environmental issues, unemployment and low incomes, etc. So these issues create what we call the quality of life or the standard of life. the body of EU legislation, standards and policies that need to be internalized on legal, institutional and societal level in candidate countries are called EU acquis. And the chapters of this acquis form the basis of the accession negotiations for each candidate country and correspond to different areas where reforms need to be implemented in order to meet the accession conditions. So the candidate countries are required to adapt their administrative, legal and institutional infrastructures and to bring their national legislation in line with the EU legislation. But what I want to emphasize is that the decisions made in Brussels or elsewhere in the EU have their impact in our ordinary life and are mostly expressed in the public space. So if we want to answer the question whether we are ready for membership or not, I think that we should not look in the official reports, but we should, this can be best assessed if we take a walk in the city or if we try to drive over the country. So do we have enough green spaces? Do we have enough walkable areas? Do we have good roads? Do we have clean air? Moreover, how much time we need to arrive at work? It was also something that we discussed in the modules. How much time we need to get a basic service from the institutions? Do we need to take a day off from work in order to finish these simple tasks? Do our children have good education and prospects? I believe that these are the benchmarks, not only what is mentioned in the reports. And I'm very happy that these were also topics that we addressed within the forum. So when it comes to EU negotiations, one thing that needs to be clarified is that what is being negotiated is not the rules themselves, not the acquis as such. So we are not negotiating for the EU to change the acquis on their side, but we are negotiating how to comply with the benchmarks, the needed time, the resources, and all other aspects, the funds we need to implement these reforms. And in line with the current enlargement methodologies, these chapters are also organized into clusters, but are interconnected. So bringing Europe at home is mostly about education, it's about having healthy environment, it's about jobs, it's about meritocracy versus clientelism, and it's about rule of law versus corruption. So having institutions which are resilient to corruption will contribute to better implementation of the public procurement procedures, so providing better services for the citizens. In terms of the economic criteria, we must not forget that the EU single market is home to more than 20 million companies, and the trade within the single market accounts for 56 million jobs, as the latest data shows. So access to the EU single market can definitely provide better options for the companies and can create better jobs. But on the other side, we must have in mind that companies should be able to bear the competition and to cope with the market forces. Sustainable urban development is also a topic in the EU. So in times of rapid urbanization, Europe as such is increasingly facing dire urban challenges, which are ranging from the global health crisis and the rise of societal inequalities, demographic changes, climate change, and environmental degradation. So the EU established urban agenda for the EU as an integrated and coordinated approach to deal with the urban dimension of the EU and national policies, and its latest instruments consist of 4 new themes. One is greening cities, the other one is sustainable tourism, food, and cities of equality. So all these topics were actually discussed at this forum, and all these topics provide opportunities for us. The urban agenda for the EU addresses these problems that cities are facing, but by setting a partnership between different stakeholders, including the Commission, the EU organizations, national governments, of course, city authorities, and other stakeholders. So urban authorities are supported to apply for funding from all EU programs, including those into the cohesion policy. For us in the region, the EU, to answer to these challenges, I believe we must start with providing better infrastructure and providing better living conditions to the citizens. So speaking of this, coming from Skopje to Tirana took me more than 8 hours. And I was told that I was actually very lucky because it takes up to 10. So I'm looking forward to my return this evening. Considering the distance of only 350 kilometers, more or less, I'm not sure if this is the best we can do. So we must start as a region to work together and to work more closely, and we need to redouble our efforts and energy and do well at home and in the region. Because good news from one country helps the region, while bad news harms the region. And bad news usually occupies more space in the public discourse and are threatening the security landscape of the whole region, fueling populism. Or, for example, we are known in Skopje as winners in air pollution. So what I believe is that we should start with topics that unite us, like the topic of this event, sustainable urban development. So all the citizens in every country, in every part of the region, in every city, in every town, to have better and faster roads, better environmental quality, and better housing conditions. What usually unites us, as we also mentioned during this forum, are floods, earthquakes, and natural and human disasters. So maybe it's time to start working together also to prevent this crisis. And some of the initiatives for regional cooperation are trying to mobilize such energy. For example, there are agreements between North Macedonia and Albania within the Open Balkan Initiative for mutual recognition of qualifications, establishing freedom of movement between workers. But as far as I know, the implementation has not yet been finalized. So some of the initiatives maybe even do not lack political will, but however are not that easy to be operationalized, or we are lacking the right resources. So this is why I believe that the EU accession process has still unique function and transformative role, and it can serve as a framework providing the needed resources, but the rest of the work must be done by us. It can serve as a lane mower to cut the grass. It can also provide better quality to the water we needed or the soil additives for the grass, but it's definitely not a magic stick. And that is the reality that we need to face. So speaking about the sustainable development, EU adopted a comprehensive economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans, which aims to support the economic recovery of the region, support green transition, foster regional integration and convergence, and it mobilized over 9 million funds. But the green agenda remains a top priority within this instrument, and sustainable and smart mobility strategy includes EU support for rehabilitation and construction of new resilient and smart transport infrastructure, especially rail and public transports, as well as green transport solutions. Still, the absorption of these funds on countries' level depends on our capacities to plan and to implement projects of strategic importance. Finally, we should be very honest and also speak about the imperatives and realities that are on the side of the EU. Because the geopolitical imperative for the EU is to widen and to deepen. And apart from the technical aspect of the process, compliance with the EU rules and policies, there is also the geopolitical context. Enlarging the EU with the Western Balkan countries that are willing and that are able to meet the conditions is not a favor or a concession on the side of the EU. It's also in the EU's strategic interest to have Western Balkans as their strategic partners and moreover as member states as a way of structuring the continent around EU values and standards. So a credible enlargement perspective and a credible enlargement policy is a geostrategic investment in peace, stability, security, and economic growth in the whole of Europe. And we should not forget that maybe we are not part of the European Union, but we are definitely part of Europe. So EU must maintain its capacity to act because its a lack of capacity to bring decisions and weakening and delaying the necessary actions actually came with a price, especially in terms of enlargement policy. One of the most discussed topics nowadays is the stage accession that is probably going to be offer to the region, which means bringing the candidate countries closer to the EU step by step. So more concrete and significant contribution to the needed reforms was introduced in the report prepared by Franco-German experts that was published last week, and it actually outlined the necessity of deepening before widening the EU. So it's high time for a new joint effort, and it's high time for reforms to be implemented, but both in the EU and in the candidate countries. What we need is to work together as credible partners, but also to show that we have something to provide, that we are also able to bring good news to the European Union, and that is why we actually want to become member states. And there can be a political decision overnight for our countries to join the EU. But one thing is joining the EU, another thing is becoming European. And I think that we do have the capacity to be European, as this forum showed and all the discussions that we had until now.